When the waiter placed the leather-bound check on the table, my mother didn't even glance at it. She slid it, smoothly, deliberately, across the white linen toward me. "Sweetheart," she said, smiling the way she always did when she wanted something, "you've got this, right?" The total at the bottom read $5,612.47. They thought this was just another dinner. They had no idea it would end their lives as they knew them. Before starting the story, please subscribe and like the video and listen through end for chill. My parents had always loved appearances. Even when I was a kid, everything about our life was carefully curated. What neighborhood we lived in, what schools I attended, which churches we showed up at on Sundays. We were never rich, but we were excellent at looking like we were. So when my mother called me on a Thursday afternoon and said, "Your father and I want to celebrate something special. Dinner tonight?" I didn't question it. "Where?" I asked, already picturing the usual upscale but reasonable steakhouse. She paused. "Le Ciel Privé." I nearly dropped my phone. Le Ciel Privé was one of Atlanta's most exclusive restaurants. Private dining rooms, celebrity clientele, sommeliers who spoke in reverent whispers. It was the kind of place you went to celebrate mergers, not birthdays. "Mom," I said carefully, "that place is expensive." She laughed. "Oh, don't worry, it's a celebration." That should have been my first warning. When I arrived, they were already seated in a corner booth overlooking the city skyline. My father stood up to hug me, wearing a tailored jacket I'd never seen before. My mother's diamond earrings caught the candlelight. They were glowing, too glowing. Before I could sit down, my mother waved the waiter over. "Another bottle of the Bordeaux," she said, without consulting the menu. The waiter hesitated, glanced at me, then nodded. "Of course." As the night went on, the orders escalated. Lobster tails flown in that morning, A5 Wagyu steak, truffle risotto, imported caviar just to try, dessert samplers for the entire table. I noticed something odd. They never once asked what I wanted. Plates appeared, disappeared, replaced by more expensive plates. Empty wine bottles lined the table like trophies. My father leaned back, sighing contentedly. "You only live once, right?" I smiled, but my stomach was tight. When the final course was cleared, my mother dabbed her lips and glanced around the restaurant. "This place never disappoints," she said. Then the waiter arrived with the check. He placed it neatly between my parents, and my mother immediately slid it to me. "Go ahead," she said, still smiling. I stared at the number. $5,612.47. I swallowed. "I thought this was your celebration." My father frowned. "Well, yes, but you're doing so well now." There it was. I worked as a forensic accountant. I did well, but not $5,000 dinner well, especially not unplanned. "You didn't mention I was paying." My mother's smile thinned. "Don't be dramatic, it's just money." Something in her tone, dismissive, entitled, snapped inside me. "Did you invite me here knowing you couldn't pay?" I asked. My father's jaw tightened. "Lower your voice." That's when I noticed it, the slight panic behind their confidence. "I don't have that kind of money on me now," my mother said quickly. "Our cards are temporarily frozen." Frozen. That word rang in my head like a bell. "For what reason?" I asked. My father waved his hand. "Bank error. Happens all the time." I knew better. I excused myself to the restroom, but instead of fixing my makeup, I pulled out my phone. I logged into a system I hadn't used in years, a system I had sworn never to use on my own family. But something was wrong, and wrong was my job. Using publicly accessible financial records, I did a quick search. What I found made my blood run cold. Multiple shell companies registered under unfamiliar names, properties held in LLCs with overlapping directors, offshore accounts flagged for irregular transfers. And then I saw a familiar signature, my father's. This wasn't just bad money management. This was financial crime. Suddenly, everything made sense. The business trips when I was younger, the cash-only renovations, the way my parents always seemed one step ahead of creditors. They weren't lucky. They were hiding. And now something had gone wrong. The frozen accounts, the sudden lavish spending, the desperate attempt to make me pay. They weren't celebrating. They were burning money before it vanished. I returned to the booth calmly. "I can't pay," I said evenly. My mother's eyes widened. "Don't embarrass us." "Then tell me," I replied, lowering my voice, "why federal flags are popping up next to Dad's companies." The color drained from their faces. "What did you do?" my father whispered. "I did my job, the same job you raised me to be proud of." The waiter approached, sensing tension. "Is everything all right?" I smiled politely. "Not exactly." I could have paid. I could have saved them, at least for that night. Instead, I stood up. "I'm not covering this, but I won't stop what happens next." My mother grabbed my wrist. "You wouldn't." I leaned down and whispered, "You already destroyed yourselves." I walked out. 2 weeks later, my phone exploded with notifications. IRS investigation, federal indictments, seized assets, news articles with blurred photos of my parents leaving a courthouse. Their friends disappeared overnight. The country club revoked their membership. Their house, our house, was repossessed. They tried to call me. I didn't answer. Months later, I received a letter from my mother, handwritten, shaky. She didn't apologize. She blamed me. "You could have fixed this," she wrote. "You chose not to." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, because the truth was simple. I didn't destroy them. I just refused to lie for them. And all because of a $5,600 luxury dinner they thought I'd quietly pay for, never realizing it would expose everything they'd spent a lifetime hiding. Sometimes the most expensive meal isn't the one on the table. It's the one that forces the truth to come out and shows you exactly who the people you love really are. For weeks after that letter, I lived in a strange quiet. No calls, no surprise visits, no guilt-laced voicemails from relatives telling me to forget and forget. Just silence. At first, it felt like relief. Then it felt like grief. I kept replaying memories I'd never questioned before. My mother insisting we pay cash for things, my father teaching me never to trust banks too much, the way they'd panic whenever official mail arrived. All the red flags I'd unknowingly grown up inside. I realized something painful. I hadn't lost my parents that night at the restaurant. I'd lost them years ago. I just didn't know it yet. The trial was impossible to avoid. Local news, national coverage, headlines filled with words like embezzlement, tax evasion, international fraud. Former business partners testified. Accountants took the stand. Emails were read aloud. Emails I recognized, written in my father's voice, filled with instructions on how to hide money, how to move funds, how to erase trails. I never attended the courtroom. I couldn't bear to see them that way. Not because I pitied them, but because I finally understood them. They weren't victims of circumstance. They were architects of deception, and they had been building it their entire lives. One night, months into the trial, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Hey," my father said quietly. His voice sounded smaller, older. "I don't have much time," he added. "They monitor these calls." I said nothing. "We never meant for you to get involved. That dinner, things were already collapsing. We thought maybe if we looked normal, it would all feel normal again." I closed my eyes. "You tried to make me part of it," I said, "whether you meant to or not." He exhaled. "We thought you'd understand." "That's the problem," I replied. "I did." The line went dead. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all major counts: prison sentences, asset forfeiture, lifetime bans from holding executive positions. But the real punishment wasn't legal, it was social. Friends vanished overnight. Relatives distanced themselves. People who once laughed at their table suddenly pretended they'd never met them. Reputation, carefully polished for decades, shattered in months. And there was nothing money could do to fix that. People assumed I must have inherited something after it was all over. I didn't. No secret accounts, no hidden property, no apology money. What I inherited instead was clarity. I learned that love without honesty is just control, that loyalty without boundaries is self-destruction, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, even from the people you love. Exactly 1 year after that night, I returned to Le Ciel Privé, alone. I ordered a modest meal, drank water, paid my bill the moment it arrived. As I stood to leave, the same waiter recognized me. "Rough night last time," he said gently. I smiled. "Necessary one." Walking out, I realized something profound. That restaurant didn't mark the worst moment of my life. It marked the moment I stopped protecting lies that were never mine to carry. People still ask me if I regret not paying. The answer is no. Because if I had paid that night, I wouldn't have just covered a dinner. I would have covered crimes. I would have covered lies. I would have covered a lifetime of deception. And some debts, no matter how much you love someone, are too expensive to carry. They ordered a $5,600 luxury dinner, believing money could still fix everything. What they didn't realize was that the bill had already come due. And this time, it wasn't one I was willing to pay. Even after everything was over, it wasn't really over. Grocery stores triggered memories. Restaurants made my chest tighten. Anytime someone joked, "You've got this, right?" my stomach dropped. Trauma doesn't announce itself loudly. Sometimes it just sits beside you, quiet, waiting. I started therapy, not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to understand why betrayal from strangers hurts less than betrayal from blood. My therapist said something that stayed with me. You didn't just lose your parents. You lost the version of your childhood that made sense. That was it. That was the ache. The silence didn't last forever. An aunt called first, then a cousin, then people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanted to check in. Some were kind, others were careful, a few were angry. "You could have helped them," one uncle said bluntly. "Your family." I took a breath. Family doesn't hand you a $5,600 bill and expect silence. He hung up. That's when I realized something else had changed. I no longer needed to be understood by people who benefited from my compliance. 6 months after sentencing, I received a notice. Unclaimed personal items, 1 storage unit, my name listed as next of kin. I almost didn't go, but curiosity and closure pulled me there. Inside were boxes of old documents, photo albums, keepsakes, and ledgers. Pages and pages of handwritten numbers, dates, transfers, notes like "move the for audit" and "trust account Cayman." Mixed between them were birthday cards they'd written me, report cards they'd saved, photos of us smiling, love and crime stored side by side. I cried for the first time since the restaurant. At the bottom of one box, I found a letter addressed to me, unsent, in my mother's handwriting. It read, "We always meant to stop, just not yet." That was the moment it clicked. There was never going to be a right time, never a clean ending, never a confession over dinner. The lie wasn't temporary, it was the plan. People confuse forgiveness with reunion. They are not the same. I forgave my parents quietly, not for them, but for myself. I released the anger because it was poisoning me, not them. But I did not rebuild the bridge. Some doors close not out of hatred, but out of wisdom. I made myself a promise after everything settled. I will never pay a price for peace that costs me my integrity. Not for love, not for family, not for comfort, especially not for appearances. That rule has saved me more than once. A journalist reached out months later. She wanted my side. I declined, because the truth didn't need my commentary. The facts spoke loudly enough, and I didn't want to turn my pain into entertainment, even though that irony wasn't lost on me. People fixate on the number, $5,600. They think that's the shocking part. It isn't. The real cost was a childhood built on lies, a trust that can't be rebuilt, a family name that collapsed under its own weight. That dinner didn't ruin my parents. It simply stopped protecting them. Before transfers cut communication completely, my mother sent a final message, just 5 words. I hope it was worth it. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I typed back, "It was necessary." She never replied. I live quieter now. Smaller apartment, fewer people, stronger boundaries. I still work in financial investigations, but I choose my cases carefully. I no longer chase villains. I chase truth. And sometimes, truth costs everything. That $5,600 check never got paid by me, but it bought something far more valuable. Freedom from lies I didn't create. Freedom from loyalty that demanded silence. Freedom from a life built on pretending. They ordered luxury believing it would distract from collapse. Instead, it exposed it. And I walked away with nothing except my name, my integrity, and a future that finally belongs to me. For a while, I considered changing my last name, not out of shame, but exhaustion. Every background check, every new client onboarding, every whispered pause when someone recognized it. The name still carried weight, just not the kind my parents wanted. In the end, I kept it, because changing it would have felt like erasing myself to clean up their mess. I decided instead to redefine it. A year after everything collapsed, a new case landed on my desk. Corporate fraud, offshore accounts, luxury spending right before an audit. It mirrored my parents' story so closely that I froze. My supervisor noticed. "Too close to home?" he asked. I nodded. "You don't have to take it." I thought about the restaurant, the check, the lie sliding across white linen. "I do," I said finally, "but I'm doing it differently." That case became the cleanest work I'd ever done. No shortcuts, no emotional shielding, no pretending people didn't know exactly what they were doing. When the arrests happened, I didn't feel satisfaction, I felt alignment. For months, I had the same dream. I'm sitting at a long table, checks keep appearing, bills pile up faster than I can read them. Everyone is smiling, waiting for me to pay. One night, the dream changed. The check appeared, I stood up, and I walked away. I woke up, calm. It never came back. Sometimes people ask hypothetical questions. What would you do if they apologized? What if they admitted everything? What if they asked for forgiveness properly? The truth is simple. I would listen, I would acknowledge it, and I would still keep my distance. Because accountability doesn't erase impact, and love doesn't require proximity. I volunteered one evening at a financial literacy workshop. A teenage girl stayed behind after everyone left. She said, "My parents say money rules don't apply to people like us. They say that's how you get ahead." I saw myself in her eyes. I said gently, "Shortcuts always send the bill somewhere. You just don't always see who's paying." She nodded like it hurt. I hoped it also helped. 2 years later, I overheard a familiar name while dining with a friend, Le Ciel Privé. "Didn't someone get arrested after a scene there?" my friend asked. The server laughed quietly. "Yeah, management still uses it in training." "What do you mean?" "Never assume who's paying." I smiled into my water glass. There was no final confrontation, no tearful reunion, no dramatic apology scene. Just time. Time stripped the anger. Time sharpened the lessons. Time made space for a life that didn't orbit their secrets. Closure, I learned, isn't an event. It's a decision you make every day not to reopen the wound. My parents once told me they wanted to leave me everything. They did, just not what they meant. They left me a zero tolerance for deception, a spine I didn't know I had, the ability to walk away from comfort when it's built on lies. That's an inheritance no court can seize. If you're ever sitting at a table where the spending feels reckless, the smiles feel rehearsed, the bill is slid toward you without discussion, pause. Ask the uncomfortable question. Because sometimes that check isn't just for dinner. Sometimes it's for silence. And silence is always the most expensive thing you can buy. My parents thought wealth was about what people saw. Cars, wine, restaurants with views. They forgot the only currency that matters in the end. Truth. That $5,600 luxury dinner didn't just expose fraud. It exposed a lifetime of pretending and gave me permission to stop pretending too. They lost everything that night. I walked away with something far more rare, a life that's fully mine, untouched by their lies, and finally, honestly paid for. If that story gave you chill, drop a like, subscribe, and comment so I know you made it to the end. I've got another one. See you then.